The anniversary musicians had played only 7 notes when Duke Nathaniel Blackthorn entered with a magistrate and accused his wife of endangering 3 villages. Before Eliza could rise from the dinner table, he laid separation papers across her untouched plate and declared that Lady Verity Sloane would assume control of the Ravensmere waterworks. The final note from the violin died beneath the crystal chandeliers. Around the long table, 30 county commissioners, landowners, and invited tenants sat frozen in their chairs. White candles illuminated the silver place settings Eliza had chosen for the 9th anniversary of her marriage. Beside her hand rested a narrow velvet box containing the survey compass she had commissioned for Nathaniel. Eliza looked from the papers to her husband. Nathaniel still wore his dark traveling coat. Snow had melted across his broad shoulders and exhaustion shadowed his grey eyes, but his expression remained inflexible. "What have you accused me of doing?" Nathaniel placed a second document before her. It bore the seal of the county magistrate, Sir Oswald Pike, who stood beside him with his gloved hands folded over his waistcoat. "Submitting false measurements for the northern embankment," Nathaniel answered. "Your report concealed a structural weakness beneath Gate 4. A murmur moved through the room. Gate 4 controlled the river channel above Rosewick, Millcross, and Lower Harrow, the 3 poorest villages on the Ravensmere estate. Nearly 800 people lived below its retaining wall. Eliza examined the report without touching it. Her name appeared at the bottom, in a remarkably accurate imitation of her handwriting. "This is not my signature. You authorized the survey," Nathaniel said. "I authorized an inspection. I did not write this report." Lady Verity rose from Nathaniel's customary place at Eliza's right. The widow wore a wine-colored silk gown and the silver keychain belonging to the superintendent of the waterworks. Eliza's gaze settled on those keys. Only that morning, they had been locked inside her map room. Verity lowered her eyes with a convincing display of reluctance. The inspectors found the northern foundation saturated. Had Sir Oswald not intervened, the wall might have failed during the parliamentary visit. "It could still fail," Sir Oswald added. "The thaw has already begun upstream." Eliza finally looked at Nathaniel. "You entered my map room without me. I ordered it opened. You could have sent for me." "I did not know whether the records had been altered." The answer struck more deeply than the accusation. Nathaniel had been given a choice between asking his wife for the truth and treating her as a criminal. He had chosen before entering the room. Eliza kept her voice steady. "Who examined the original field book?" "Mr. Cresswell." A cold unease passed through her. Silas Cresswell had been dismissed by her father years earlier for selling falsified boundary measurements to creditors. "You allowed Cresswell into the archive." "He is now employed by the county commission," Nathaniel replied. "His former disputes with your family are irrelevant. They are relevant when he authenticates a document bearing my name." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "3 villages are in danger, Eliza. I will not turn this into another defense of your father." The words exposed the wound Verity had pressed for years. Nathaniel had never forgiven London society for suggesting that the Duke of Ravensmere owed his restored fortune to the engineer's daughter he married. Eliza's drainage system had doubled the estate's productive acreage, yet every success seemed to remind him of the whispers he pretended not to hear. Sir Oswald pushed the separation agreement closer. "Until the inquiry is concluded, Your Grace will reside at Hawthorne Lodge. You will surrender all maps, instruments, correspondence, and estate keys before sunrise." The musicians stared at their laps. Mrs. Finch, the housekeeper, had gone pale near the doorway. Eliza did not plead. "And if I refuse to sign?" Nathaniel answered, instead of the magistrate. "The order will stand without your consent." For one dangerous instant, hurt threatened her composure. 9 years earlier, Nathaniel had promised before the same witnesses who attended tonight that no title would ever matter more than her trust. Now he had used that title to silence her, before allowing her to speak. Eliza removed her wedding ring. She placed it upon the separation papers, but left the signature line blank. If you intend to condemn me publicly, Nathaniel, you may also explain publicly that I denied the charge. His face changed, but only for a moment. You will have an opportunity to answer at the inquiry. After Lady Verity has controlled my records for 2 days. Verity's fingers tightened around the superintendent's keys. The movement exposed a dark stain beneath her thumbnail. Black River Silt. Eliza's attention shifted to the velvet anniversary box. She opened it and lifted the silver compass. Mud of the same unusual color had dried around its hinge, although the instrument had been delivered directly to Nathaniel's locked study 3 days earlier. She pressed her thumb against the lid. The compass needle trembled east. Black silt existed nowhere near Gate 4. It was found only beyond the sealed eastern channel, where the old floodgate had remained closed since autumn. A servant hurried into the dining room, breathing hard. Your Grace, a message from the river warden. Nathaniel broke the seal. As he read, the color drained from his face. The eastern gate has begun to open. Eliza looked at Verity's stained fingers, then at the false report accusing her of weakening an entirely different wall. At last, she understood. The separation was not the consequence of the danger. It had been arranged to remove the only person who would recognize where the real danger lay. The separation had been arranged to remove the only person who would recognize where the real danger lay. Eliza closed the compass and turned to the breathless servant. Who sent the message? Mr. Daniel Hart, Your Grace. He was inspecting the eastern channel when the warning chain began moving. Daniel was Ravensmere's senior river warden, a broad-shouldered former millwright who had worked beside Eliza's father before she was born. He would never abandon his post merely to deliver an uncertain report. Was the gate raised? Nathaniel demanded. Not fully, Your Grace. Mr. Hart jammed the lifting wheel, but the chain is still under tension. He requests men, lanterns, and the Duchess's original channel plan. Verity stepped forward. The Duchess no longer possesses authority over the waterworks. Eliza looked at her. Then perhaps you would care to explain why a gate sealed beneath my authority is opening beneath yours. A few commissioners shifted uneasily. Sir Oswald's expression hardened. This is neither the time nor place for insinuations. 800 people live below that channel, Eliza replied. It is precisely the time. Nathaniel folded the message and ordered the stable master to prepare horses. Eliza moved toward the door, but Sir Oswald blocked her path. You are subject to an official inquiry. I have not been arrested. Your presence may compromise the inspection. Eliza turned to Nathaniel. For 9 years she had watched him resolve disputes with a glance or a word. Tonight, he hesitated, looking from his wife to the magistrate, as though deciding which consequence he feared more, defying Sir Oswald or trusting the woman he had just humiliated. Eliza will remain at the hall, he said at last. Mr. Hart requested my plan. Verity has access to the archive. A copied map will be sufficient. Eliza felt the final thread of marital loyalty draw tight inside her, but she refused to let it break before those villages were safe. No copy contains the repairs made after the spring flood, she said. I recorded those measurements in a field book kept inside my private cabinet. If you ride without them, you will not know which retaining wall can bear the redirected pressure. Nathaniel stared at her. Why were the repairs omitted from the official map? Because Parliament delayed payment, and I used my pin money to purchase the stone before the estate could reimburse me. The work was completed 6 weeks ago, but your survey office has not yet transferred my notes. Surprise moved across his face. He had attended 2 parliamentary dinners celebrating Ravensmere's improved harvests, but he had never asked who had financed the channels that protected them. Eliza's father had taught her to read gradients before she was 12. After marrying Nathaniel, she had spent 6 years walking every embankment, marking every culvert, and learning which cottages flooded first when the river rose. Her calculations had reclaimed 400 acres of marshland and increased the estate's rents by nearly a third. Nathaniel had praised his superintendent for those results before Parliament. He had never known the superintendent followed Eliza's plans. Verity recovered first. If such repairs occurred without the Duke's approval, they prove the charge against her. They prove I prevented Lower Harrow from flooding while you were in Bath, Eliza answered. She looked directly at Nathaniel. You may take my maps, my rooms, and the authority you once entrusted to me, but you will not use my knowledge in secret and then allow another person to claim it. If I assist tonight, every instruction I give will be recorded under my name before 2 witnesses. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed, yet something resembling shame passed through them. Agreed, Sir Oswald objected. Your Grace, 3 villages matter more than appearances, Nathaniel said. Mrs. Finch, bring the Duchess's cloak. Hart requested her, and she will come. Verity's fingers tightened again around the superintendent's keys. Eliza noticed that the smallest key on the ring was not hers. Its bow was round rather than oval, and fresh scratches crossed its stem. Someone had replaced the archive key after opening her cabinet. Minutes later, Eliza entered the map room with Nathaniel, Verity, Sir Oswald, and 2 commissioners. Drawers stood open. Rolled plans covered the central table, their ribbons cut rather than untied. Eliza crossed to the walnut cabinet and held out her hand. The key. Verity surrendered the ring reluctantly. As Eliza expected, the substituted key would not turn. Daniel Hart's young assistant, Thomas Bell, arrived carrying an iron lantern and a sealed wooden alarm token from the Eastern Station. Mr. Hart told me to place this only in the Duchess's hands. Thomas ignored Sir Oswald's protest and gave it to Eliza. She had hired the quiet 18-year-old 2 winters earlier after discovering him repairing a broken mill gauge with discarded clock parts. He had never forgotten that she trusted his skill when no one else would. Eliza examined the token. One edge had been stained with black silt. The other bore 3 freshly carved notches, Daniel's signal that the mechanism had been opened deliberately. Break the cabinet, Nathaniel ordered. A footman forced the lock. Inside lay Eliza's field book, but the blue ribbon she always tied around it had been replaced with red cord. She opened to the Eastern Channel measurements. 2 pages were missing. Verity released a careful breath that might have sounded like relief to anyone who was not watching her. Eliza turned to the false report on the table. It claimed Gate 4's foundation had weakened after weeks of leakage. Yet Daniel's alarm token was dry above the silt line, proving the eastern gate had been opened from the upper mechanism rather than forced by rising water. She then studied the copied survey attached to the accusation and found something even more troubling. This map records the new retaining stones, she said. Nathaniel frowned. You said those measurements existed only in your field book. They did. Eliza looked at the torn binding, the false signature, and the superintendent's keys hanging from Verity's waist. Whoever forged this report copied information from the pages stolen tonight, but dated the document 3 weeks before those measurements were ever written. From the courtyard came the thunder of an arriving horse. A second messenger stumbled into the map room, his coat wet to the waist. Your Graces, Mr. Hart has lost control of the lifting wheel. He struggled for breath before delivering the rest. And someone has ordered the residents of Lower Harrow to evacuate toward the eastern bank, the very ground that will disappear first if the gate opens. And someone has ordered the residents of Lower Harrow to evacuate toward the eastern bank, the very ground that will disappear first if the gate opens. For one stunned second, no one in the map room moved. Then Eliza seized her cloak from Mrs. Finch and turned to Thomas Bell. How many families have left their homes? Nearly half the village, Your Grace. Constables arrived with a written order bearing the Duke's seal. Nathaniel's head snapped toward Sir Oswald. Did you authorize an evacuation? I instructed local officers to prepare one, the magistrate replied. I gave no order to begin. Then someone has used both your authority and my seal, Nathaniel said. Verity stepped between them with practiced calm. We can determine who made the error after the villagers are safe. Nathaniel, take the northern road and stop the procession. I shall accompany Sir Oswald to the waterworks. Eliza understood the division immediately. Verity wanted Nathaniel away from the eastern gate, while she gained unrestricted access to its mechanism. The northern road is flooded every winter after dark, Eliza said. The shortest safe route to Lower Harrow is through Millcross. Verity's smile remained composed. According to the Duchess's maps, perhaps. According to the people who travel it. Nathaniel glanced at the torn field book, then issued his orders. Sir Oswald will remain here and secure every document. Verity, you will come with us. No one approaches the waterworks alone. A shadow crossed Verity's face before she bowed. Within minutes, 6 riders left Blackthorn Hall. Eliza rode beside Thomas at the front, her anniversary gown concealed beneath a heavy wool cloak. Nathaniel followed close behind, while Verity traveled in a small carriage guarded by 2 footmen. Snow struck Eliza's cheeks as they descended toward Millcross, but the eastern horizon showed no storm. What she heard instead was the distant clanging of the evacuation bell. 4 slow strokes, repeated without pause. That signal means fire, Thomas shouted over the horses. It did before Lady Verity replaced the village wardens, Eliza replied. 3 years earlier, Verity had persuaded Nathaniel to place several county constables under estate authority. Eliza had objected because none understood the river signals. Nathaniel had dismissed the concern as an administrative detail. Now someone was using that confusion to move hundreds of frightened people toward danger. At the Millcross Chapel, Eliza pulled hard on the reins. Thomas, ring 2 quick strokes, followed by 1 long. Repeat it until the Lower Harrow bell answers. Nathaniel caught up beside her. What does that signal mean? Immediate danger. Seek high ground west of the mill. If the villagers have already been ordered east, they may ignore it. They know my signal. Eliza dismounted and entered the chapel tower with Thomas. The old bell rope burned against her palms as they sounded the warning together. For several agonizing moments, only the wind answered. Then, from beyond the dark fields, the Lower Harrow bell rang twice quickly and once long. A second bell answered from Rosewick. Eliza closed her eyes in relief. The villagers had understood. When she descended, Nathaniel stood beside the horses, watching clusters of lanterns turn away from the eastern road and climb toward the ridge. You established those signals? He asked. After the flood 6 years ago. Why was I never informed? Eliza looked at him steadily. The complete river plan was included in the blue portfolio I placed on your desk. You returned it unopened because Parliament was debating the grain tariffs. Nathaniel's expression tightened. He could not deny the memory. But Verity's carriage arrived before he answered. The villagers are moving west, Eliza told her. No lives will be lost because of the false order. Verity looked toward the lanterns retreating up the ridge. For the first time that evening, her composure slipped. You countermanded an order bearing the Duke's seal. I prevented a burial procession. They continued toward the eastern waterworks, where the river roared between stone walls, built by Eliza's father nearly 30 years earlier. Daniel Hart stood on the upper platform, with blood running from a cut above his temple. He and 2 laborers had forced an iron bar through the lifting wheel, but the chain strained so violently that the metal had begun to bend. The locking pin was removed, Daniel called. Someone wound the counterweight before cutting the brake rope. Eliza climbed the slick stairs without waiting for assistance. Nathaniel reached for her arm, but she avoided his hand and knelt beside the mechanism. A new rope had been spliced to the original brake line. Its fibers were pale, dry, and free of river grime. This was prepared elsewhere and brought here tonight, she said. Daniel handed her the severed end. A short strand of red wool had been twisted around the splice. It matched the cord placed around her altered field book. Eliza wrapped both pieces in her handkerchief and gave them to Thomas. "Keep this on your person. Give it to no one unless I ask for it before witnesses." Verity watched the exchange with narrowed eyes. Daniel pointed toward the counterweight. "We can lower the gate only by releasing the western balance chain, but the control lever has been locked inside the superintendent's station." Every gaze turned toward the silver keys at Verity's waist. She removed the ring and handed it to Nathaniel. "None of the keys opened the station. These are the keys taken from the Duchess's map room," Verity said. "I was never given another set." Eliza examined the station lock. Black silt filled its lower edge, but around the keyhole gleamed a thin crescent of fresh oil. Someone had opened it less than an hour earlier. She took the silver compass from her cloak and pressed its narrow setting pin into the simple warded lock. The mechanism yielded. Inside, Daniel released the balance chain, while Eliza calculated the necessary turns from the water level carved into the wall. The lifting wheel groaned backward, and inch by inch, the eastern gate descended until the roar weakened to a controlled rush. A cheer rose from the laborers below. Eliza had won them several hours, perhaps until dawn. Nathaniel entered the station and found a folded evacuation order lying beside the lever. His ducal seal appeared in red wax beneath Sir Oswald's name. "This was issued from my office," he said. "Impossible," Eliza replied. "Your official wax is black." Nathaniel studied the red impression. Doubt entered his eyes, but Verity spoke softly behind him. "The village clerk may have used what he possessed. An incorrect color does not prove conspiracy." Nathaniel folded the order instead of answering. He had noticed the contradiction, yet Eliza saw him reach once more for the safety of an explanation that demanded nothing from him. Daniel called her toward the outer platform. Beneath the descending water, a row of newly driven stakes had appeared along the eastern bank, each marking a narrow strip of village land. Eliza recognized the surveyor's crescent carved into their tops. Cresswell had measured the ground before tonight's evacuation. She turned toward Verity and found the widow no longer watching Nathaniel. Verity was staring directly at Thomas, the young assistant carrying the red thread, and the cold calculation in her eyes revealed that she had finally understood which two people now threatened her plan. Verity was staring directly at Thomas, the young assistant carrying the red thread, and the cold calculation in her eyes revealed that she had finally understood which two people now threatened her plan. Before Eliza could warn him, the western balance chain gave a violent crack. The control lever flew forward, throwing Daniel Hart against the stone wall, and the eastern gate began rising again. Water exploded through the widening gap. "The anchor beam is splitting," Daniel shouted. Eliza saw the problem at once. The saboteur had not merely removed the locking pin. Someone had sawed halfway through the oak beam supporting the counterweight, ensuring the gate would fail even if they recovered control. She ordered the laborers to bring cart axles, chains, and every length of timber from the maintenance shed. Nathaniel began issuing the same instructions more loudly, but the men looked to Eliza before moving. "There is no time to replace the beam," she said. "We must transfer the weight to the western retaining wall." Daniel stared at the wall. "The masonry may not hold. It will hold if we divide the strain across 3 anchor points." She marked the positions with chalk, calculating distances from memory because the relevant pages had been torn from her field book. Nathaniel watched her direct the laborers through freezing spray, her anniversary gown growing heavy with river water beneath her cloak. She secured the first chain herself, then stopped Thomas from climbing onto the damaged beam. "You are carrying evidence," she reminded him. "Your duty is to preserve it, not prove your courage." Verity approached the young man. "Give the handkerchief to me. I am superintendent now." Thomas stepped backward. "Her Grace instructed me otherwise. Her Grace no longer commands you." "He remains under my protection until the inquiry," Eliza said. Verity's expression sharpened. "You would obstruct the lawful superintendent for the sake of a mill boy. I would protect any witness whose evidence you appear unusually eager to possess." Nathaniel looked between them, but said nothing. As the last chain was tightened, the damaged beam split completely. The transferred weight struck the western anchors with a force that shook the station. One iron bolt tore loose, but the other two held. Daniel forced the lever down, and the gate descended until only a narrow current passed beneath it. The immediate danger was contained. Nathaniel exhaled, but Verity had already turned toward the county commissioners arriving behind Sir Oswald. "By the Duke's authority, we stabilized the mechanism," she announced. "My first action as superintendent was to ensure the western wall carried the counterweight." Eliza stared at her. The solution had been spoken in Eliza's voice scarcely 10 minutes earlier, yet Verity presented it as her own, while Sir Oswald's clerk recorded every word. "That instruction came from the Duchess," Daniel said. Sir Oswald ignored him. "Lady Verity's prompt command will be included in the official account." Nathaniel heard the lie. Eliza saw recognition in his face, followed by the familiar retreat into silence. Correcting the record would require him to admit before the commissioners that the wife he had stripped of authority had just saved the villages his appointed superintendent endangered. Eliza approached the clerk. "Write my objection beneath the report. I receive instructions from the magistrate. Then record your refusal and sign it." The clerk's pen stopped. Several laborers turned to watch. Sir Oswald's cheeks reddened, but Daniel spoke clearly enough for all of them. "I witnessed Her Grace calculate the anchors. So did every man on this platform." One by one, the laborers nodded. The clerk reluctantly added Eliza's statement. It was a small correction, but it broke Verity's control over the first official account. At that moment, one of the constables emerged from the maintenance shed, holding 2 torn pages. "These were found inside the boy's satchel." Thomas went white. Eliza recognized her missing field notes. The constable seized him before he could speak. "I never placed them there," Thomas cried. "The satchel was beside the horses." Verity touched Nathaniel's sleeve. "The boy had access to the map room and the eastern station. He may have forged the report for the Duchess." The accusation offered Nathaniel a convenient answer. An ambitious wife, aided by a grateful servant, had created a danger she could dramatically solve. Sir Oswald ordered Thomas taken into custody. Eliza stepped between the young man and the constables. "Search the pages before you arrest him. Their presence in his satchel is sufficient." Sir Oswald replied, "No, the lower corners are dry." Eliza held one page beneath the lantern. Thomas rode through snow and stood beside an open gate. "Everything in his satchel is damp except these pages. They were placed there after we arrived," Verity answered smoothly, "or he protected them beneath his coat. Then his coat would carry blue chalk from my annotations." Eliza rubbed the paper. No color transferred to her glove. "These are copied pages, traced before the blue measurements were added." Sir Oswald's patience broke. "You are interfering with an officer of the county. I am preventing you from imprisoning an innocent witness. Stand aside, or I shall add obstruction to the charges against you." Eliza knew what refusal might cost. Under the temporary separation order, Sir Oswald could restrict her movements, remove Thomas from her protection, and send her directly to Hawthorne Lodge before she recovered any evidence. Yet allowing the magistrate to take him would place the boy in the hands of the people who had just tried to frame him. She removed the small purse containing her personal seal and placed it in Daniel's hand. "Take Thomas to the chapel at Millcross. Remain before Reverend Hale and at least 4 villagers at all times. Record the names of everyone who enters or leaves." Sir Oswald signaled the constables, but Nathaniel finally stepped between them. "No one will seize the boy until the authenticity of those pages is determined." Eliza looked at her husband, surprised despite herself. Verity immediately produced the original false report. "Then let Mr. Cresswell compare them at Blackthorn Hall. He is the only county surveyor qualified to authenticate the writing." "Cresswell is implicated by the stakes on the eastern bank," Eliza said. Nathaniel rubbed a hand across his tired face. "We will return to the hall and examine everything in daylight." As Daniel led Thomas toward the chapel, under the protection of 6 laborers, the boy caught Eliza's eye. Your Grace, I saw Mr. Cresswell at the house yesterday. He came through the servants' entrance carrying a roll tied with red cord. Verity's face remained calm, but one hand closed around her skirt. Did you see where he went? Eliza asked. The Duke's private study. Nathaniel stiffened. No one entered that room without his permission. Back at Blackthorn Hall shortly after dawn, Eliza stopped outside the study. Before you sign another order, inspect your seal cabinet, the visitor register, and the drawer where the compass was kept. Compare the red cord on Cresswell's roll with the thread Thomas preserved. Do this yourself, Nathaniel, not through Verity, Sir Oswald, or one of their clerks. Sir Oswald arrived carrying a warrant authorizing Thomas's arrest and a second document transferring complete control of the waterworks to Verity until the parliamentary inspection. Your Grace, he said to Nathaniel, we require your signature before noon. Nathaniel stood with the warrant in one hand and the key to his private study in the other. Behind that locked door waited the evidence that could prove whether Eliza had betrayed him or whether he had condemned his wife to protect the very people deceiving him. Nathaniel stood with the warrant in one hand and the key to his private study in the other. Behind that locked door waited the evidence that could prove whether Eliza had betrayed him or whether he had condemned his wife to protect the very people deceiving him. Open the room, Eliza said. You need only 10 minutes. Sir Oswald drew out his pocket watch. The parliamentary commissioners will arrive before noon. If Ravensmere has no recognized superintendent, when they inspect the eastern gate, they may suspend the county improvement grant. That grant would finance the new canal, secure Nathaniel's influence in Parliament, and prevent several heavily mortgaged farms from falling into creditors' hands. Verity placed a gentle hand on his arm. Inspect the room if you must, but remember that Eliza knew where the compass had been kept. She also knew which records would implicate her. Nathaniel unlocked the study. The fire had gone out, yet the room smelled faintly of warm sealing wax. His cabinet stood beside the writing desk, its doors apparently closed. Eliza followed him inside with Sir Oswald, Verity, and 2 commissioners serving as witnesses. Nathaniel opened the cabinet and found the ducal seal in its velvet recess, but the black wax stick beside it was shorter than it had been the previous morning. A red fiber clung to one brass hinge. Eliza pointed to it. The same cord found on the brake rope and my altered field book. Verity examined the fiber without touching it. Red thread is used in every estate office in England. Not this kind, Eliza replied. It has been waxed to resist water. Nathaniel opened the visitor register. The page for the previous day listed no entry for Silas Cresswell, though the ink around the final line remained tacky. Someone had scraped away a name and smoothed the paper with a knife. Eliza took a small magnifying lens from the desk and tilted the page toward the window. Indentations remained beneath the erased entry. Cresswell signed this book, or Thomas Bell wrote his name to support the Duchess's accusation, Sir Oswald said. Thomas was repairing a gauge at Rosewick yesterday. Reverend Hale and 6 millers saw him. Nathaniel turned toward Verity. Did Cresswell enter this study? She allowed a wounded silence to form before answering. Yes, I sent him here. Eliza had expected another denial. The admission unsettled Nathaniel more. Without my permission, he asked. You gave me authority to investigate the missing survey, Verity replied. Cresswell required access to the compass and your seal impression to determine whether Eliza's reports were genuine. I did not tell you because I hoped to spare you the humiliation until we possessed certainty. He handled the seal. He examined it in my presence. Nothing more. Eliza looked at the shortened black wax, then let him explain why wax is missing. Sir Oswald placed the warrant on Nathaniel's desk. Cresswell is already traveling here. We can question him during the formal inquiry. Until then, the testimony of a suspected servant cannot outweigh the findings of a county surveyor. Nathaniel stared at the erased register, the red fiber, and the seal cabinet. Doubt had become impossible to ignore, but so had the commissioners gathering in the entrance hall below. If he delayed the appointment, Parliament might withdraw the grant. If he admitted the evidence against Eliza was compromised, he would also admit that he had publicly separated from his wife, without a fair examination. Verity lowered her voice. The estate cannot survive another scandal involving her family. Your father spent 20 years restoring the Blackthorn name. Do not sacrifice that work, because Eliza refuses to accept the consequences of her own decisions. Eliza saw the old shame enter Nathaniel's expression. London had mocked him for marrying beneath his rank. Now Verity offered him a chance to prove that the Duke of Ravensmere could not be governed by an engineer's daughter.
Nathaniel,
Eliza said.
the gate was sabotaged, the evacuation order was forged, and evidence was placed inside Thomas's satchel.
You know enough to postpone this. I know enough to conduct an inquiry, he answered. Then conduct one before you punish us. Sir Oswald tapped the warrant. The boy may flee. Evidence may disappear. The transfer must be completed now. Nathaniel picked up his pen. Eliza did not beg. She merely watched the man who had once trusted her judgment above every adviser in England choose his pride for the second time in a single night. If you sign, she said quietly, Verity will possess authority to alter the gates, dismiss the wardens, condemn village land, and destroy any record she declares unsafe. Read the final clause. Nathaniel glanced at it. Emergency power is necessary until Parliament completes its inspection, not to protect the river, to control it. Verity's composure slipped for only an instant. This obsession is precisely why you should be removed. Nathaniel signed the transfer. The scratch of his pen sounded louder to Eliza than the river had. He then signed Thomas's warrant. Sir Oswald sealed both documents before Nathaniel could reconsider. Daniel Hart is suspended, Verity announced. Mr. Cresswell will assume control of the Eastern Station. All temporary chains installed tonight are to be removed before the commissioners arrive. Those chains are holding the damaged beam, Eliza said. Removing them will reopen the gate. Cresswell will install a proper brace. He has never calculated that counterweight. Nathaniel turned away from her. The order stands. Sir Oswald instructed 2 constables to take Thomas from Millcross Chapel. Reverend Hale protested when they arrived, but a Duke-signed warrant left him no lawful means to refuse. Before surrendering, Thomas slipped Eliza's handkerchief containing the red thread into the parish arms chest while 6 villagers watched. Daniel recorded the transfer in the chapel register, preserving the evidence even as the constables dragged the boy away. At Blackthorn Hall, Eliza was given 1 hour to prepare for Hawthorne Lodge. Mrs. Finch wept while packing her clothes. Forgive me, Your Grace. Lady Verity has ordered every servant to surrender your letters and notebooks. You have nothing to apologize for. Eliza removed the anniversary compass from its velvet box and concealed it inside her cloak. She left the wedding ring on Nathaniel's desk beside the unsigned separation agreement. When he found her in the entrance hall, she no longer looked like a wife waiting to be believed. I will go to Hawthorne Lodge, she told him, but I will not assist Verity again, and I will not protect you from the consequences of the authority you have given her. Pain crossed his face. I am trying to protect Ravensmere. Then remember that you were warned before you signed. Her carriage had barely reached the estate gates when a barefoot boy emerged from the roadside trees, waving a strip of red cloth. Eliza ordered the driver to stop. The child was Jacob Moss, the son of a Lower Harrow ferryman. Mud covered his legs, and terror stole his breath. Lady Verity's men drove us from the Western Ridge, he gasped. They say the ground belongs to a canal company now. Mr. Cresswell has opened Gate 4, and the river is flowing toward the eastern channel. Eliza looked back at Blackthorn Hall. By transferring complete authority to Verity, Nathaniel had enabled her to control both gates at once. She could force the entire river through the weakened eastern works, flood the villages, and then condemn the ruined land before Parliament arrived. In the distance, the first emergency bell began to ring. It stopped after a single stroke, as though someone had cut the rope. In the distance, the first emergency bell began to ring. It stopped after a single stroke, as though someone had cut the rope. Eliza pulled Jacob into the carriage and ordered the driver toward the Millcross Ridge instead of Hawthorne Lodge. "Your Grace, the magistrate's order does not require me to ride willingly into a flood." She gave Jacob a blanket and questioned him as the carriage raced over the frozen road. Cresswell's men had arrived at Lower Harrow, carrying notices stamped with Nathaniel's seal. They declared every cottage east of the old mill unsafe, ordered the inhabitants onto the western ridge, then drove them off that ground when Verity's canal company claimed it. Families were now trapped on the narrow lane between Gate 4 and the eastern channel. When Eliza reached the ridge, the mechanism of the deception became visible. Gate 4 stood open upstream, driving the main current toward the sabotaged eastern works. The survey stakes did not mark a safety boundary. They traced a straight corridor through Lower Harrow, Millcross, and Rosewick. The precise route Parliament had rejected for Nathaniel's proposed canal, because hundreds of tenants would have required compensation. If the villages were destroyed by an accidental flood, Verity could have the land condemned, transfer it to her navigation company, and build the canal without honoring the existing leases. A wall of brown water struck the eastern gate. The temporary chains Eliza had installed were gone. Cresswell's replacement brace bent like green wood, and the gate rose several feet before twisting sideways. Water burst across the marked corridor. People screamed as carts overturned, and horses tore free of their traces. Eliza climbed onto the chapel steps and rang the small handbell Jacob had carried from his home. "Leave everything," she shouted. "Take the quarry path to Hawthorne Meadow. Children and elderly first. Do not cross the mill bridge." Several villagers obeyed immediately, but county constables blocked the path. Their captain displayed Verity's order, directing all evacuees toward the eastern road. Eliza held up the silver compass. "Look at the current. That road will be underwater before they reach Rosewick." "Lady Verity is superintendent," the captain answered, and the Duke signed her authority. Nathaniel arrived moments later with the parliamentary commissioners, Sir Oswald, and Verity. He saw the water swallowing the first cottages and shouted for the constables to clear the quarry path. The captain hesitated. Verity produced the transfer document. "The emergency clause places all evacuation routes under my control." "I revoke it," Nathaniel said. Sir Oswald stepped between them. "You cannot revoke a county emergency appointment during an active disaster without the commissioner's assent. You requested these powers yourself, Your Grace." Nathaniel looked at his own signature. For the first time, the authority he had always considered absolute had become a cage fashioned by his own hand. The senior parliamentary commissioner refused to intervene until responsibility for the failed gate had been established. "By then, the village will be gone," Eliza said. She turned to the constable captain. "Your sister and her children live in Lower Harrow. Will you obey a document or save them?" His face changed. He lowered his arm and ordered his men to open the quarry path. Verity watched control slip from her, then accused Eliza loudly enough for the commissioners to hear. "She is directing the flood toward Hawthorne Meadow, because that land belongs to her marriage settlement. When the estate compensates her trust, she will profit from the disaster she created." Eliza knew the allegation was false, but she also understood what must be done. Hawthorne Meadow lay above an abandoned spillway constructed by her father. Opening it would divert the flood away from the villages and into the old quarry basin. It would also strip away the meadow's fertile soil, destroy Hawthorne Lodge, and eliminate the annual income assigned to Eliza under her settlement, the only property beyond Nathaniel's direct control. She found Daniel Hart helping families onto the ridge. Although suspended, he had ignored Verity's order and returned with his laborers. "Can the old spillway still be opened?" she asked. "The timber doors were filled with stone 10 years ago. My father left a release trench beneath the north bank." Daniel understood immediately. "If we cut it, the meadow will be ruined. How long before the eastern gate fails completely?" He studied the rising water. 20 minutes. Eliza looked once toward Hawthorne Lodge, visible beyond the bare trees. It was not merely the residence chosen for her exile. Her mother's small inheritance had purchased the meadow, and its rents could have supported Eliza if her separation became permanent. Saving it would preserve her independence. Saving the villages would destroy it. Take every available man to the north bank, she said. Cut the trench. Nathaniel overheard. There must be another way. There was. You signed it away. If Hawthorne is destroyed, your settlement will be worthless. I know. He stepped closer. You should not have to surrender your security for my mistake. I am not doing it for you. Eliza faced the villagers struggling through the mud. And you will not call this sacrifice forgiveness. Nathaniel had no answer. Daniel's men reached the meadow with picks and shovels. Eliza used the compass and the surviving measurements in her memory to locate the buried trench. The first strike revealed a layer of flat stones. Men tore them free, while water climbed the eastern embankment. When the final stone shifted, the ground trembled. A dark stream rushed through the opening, widening it with every second until the north bank collapsed. Floodwater thundered into Hawthorne Meadow, uprooting hedges and smashing through the lower floor of the lodge. Eliza watched her future disappear beneath the current, but behind her, the water surrounding Lower Harrow began to fall. The last families reached the ridge safely. Then a cracking sound rolled across the valley. The old mill bridge broke at its center and vanished into the flood, carrying the main road, grain wagons, and the estate's winter stores with it. The parliamentary commissioners witnessed everything. They suspended Nathaniel's canal grant immediately, froze payments from the county improvement fund, and ordered an inquiry into the misuse of his seal. Without the bridge, Ravensmere could not transport grain to market. Without the grant, the loans secured against the next harvest would come due. Nathaniel had lost in one morning the political influence, estate revenue, and public confidence he had chosen over his wife. Yet Verity still possessed emergency authority, Cresswell still controlled the damaged gates, and Sir Oswald still held Thomas under warrant. Eliza did not rescue Nathaniel from those consequences. She organized shelter in the Millcross Chapel, assigned witnesses to count every displaced family, and ordered Daniel to record which structures had been destroyed. Near noon, he brought her a fragment of timber torn from the eastern gate. The wood should have been solid English oak, but beneath its dark surface lay soft poplar, stained to resemble a stronger material. The replacement beams from last summer, Eliza whispered. Someone substituted inferior wood before tonight. Daniel nodded. And there is worse news. The upstream warden has signaled a second thaw surge. It will reach us at midnight. The diverted spillway had saved the villages once, but Hawthorne Meadow was already full. The eastern gate could not withstand another surge, and Cresswell had dismissed every experienced warden. Eliza looked at the clock above the chapel door. They had 12 hours to prove how the gate had been weakened, recover control of the river, and build a defense strong enough to survive the next wall of water. They had 12 hours to prove how the gate had been weakened, recover control of the river, and build a defense strong enough to survive the next wall of water. Eliza transformed Millcross Chapel into a command post beyond Verity's control. Reverend Hale placed the parish meeting room at her disposal, while displaced families occupied the nave and Daniel's laborers converted the churchyard into a timber yard. Eliza assigned 3 teams, one to reinforce the surviving eastern masonry, one to deepen the quarry spillway, and one to recover anything remaining inside the flooded maintenance shed. Every instruction was entered into the parish register, witnessed by Reverend Hale and 2 village elders, preventing Verity from claiming Eliza had acted secretly. Nathaniel arrived without servants or commissioners. Mud covered his boots, and his coat bore a tear from helping pull a grain wagon out of the current. "Tell me what you require," he said. Eliza continued drawing a temporary gate brace on the back of an old hymn sheet. Thomas released, Daniel restored as senior warden, and every order concerning the river recorded publicly. Sir Oswald controls Thomas's warrant. You empowered him. I can petition the commissioners. Then do so. But you will not stand beside me here and pretend cooperation erases what you signed. Nathaniel absorbed the rebuke without defending himself. What else? Your sawmill, your remaining oak, and every able-bodied estate laborer. They answer to Daniel, not Verity or Cresswell. Agreed. Put it in writing. He did. Reverend Hale witnessed the order, and Nathaniel surrendered his personal copy to Eliza, rather than keeping it under ducal custody. Only then did she show him the poplar fragment from the failed gate. Daniel shaved away its dark coating, revealing pale, soft wood beneath. The original oak beams were installed last summer, Eliza explained. Their purchase was charged to the waterworks account, but someone substituted poplar before delivery and kept the difference. Nathaniel frowned. I approved payment for English oak. On Verity's recommendation, the invoice was included in the quarterly portfolio you returned unsigned. I believed the superintendent had examined it. I was the superintendent in practice. Nathaniel, you simply refused to call me one. The truth settled heavily between them. For 6 years, Eliza had inspected gates, financed repairs, trained wardens, negotiated tenant cooperation, and increased the estate's revenue, while Nathaniel accepted public praise for Ravensmere's improvement. He had not stolen her work deliberately, but he had found it convenient never to ask who performed it. Daniel's recovery team returned, carrying a waterlogged tool chest and a broken delivery tally found beneath the maintenance shed floor. The small wooden token bore the letters BTY on one side and a crescent cut on the other. Bramwell Timber Yard, Daniel said. Cresswell marked every shipment he inspected with that crescent. Eliza remembered the survey stakes lining the intended canal corridor. They bore the same symbol. She placed the tally beside the red thread from Thomas's handkerchief, but Reverend Hale stopped her. We must preserve how each object reached us. Before assembled witnesses, he opened the parish arms chest and removed the handkerchief Thomas had deposited. Daniel identified the brake rope strand he had cut from the eastern mechanism. A village elder confirmed she had watched Thomas place it in the chest before his arrest. Reverend Hale wrapped the red fibers, the delivery tally, and a shaving from the false beam separately, labeled each packet, sealed them with the parish seal, and recorded every transfer. Nathaniel watched the process with visible shame. You expected someone to challenge the evidence, he said. I expected the people who framed Thomas to do exactly what they did. Eliza opened the silver compass. The black silt around its hinge had dried into a brittle crust. Using a needle, she separated a small piece and compared it with soil Daniel had collected from beneath the eastern station lock. Both contained glittering fragments of ground slag from the abandoned Bramwell iron furnace. The same furnace stood behind Bramwell Timber Yard, nearly 10 miles downstream. Ordinary river silt from Ravensmere contained no slag. The compass, replacement rope, false beams, and survey stakes all passed through Bramwell, Eliza said. Cresswell used the yard as his staging ground. Reverend Hale brought out the parish lease register. Several Lower Harrow families had sought his help after unfamiliar creditors purchased their winter debts. Each notice named the Ravensmere Navigation Trust. The listed trustee was not Verity but Edgar Sloane, her late husband's brother. A second name appeared as legal guarantor, Oswald Pike. Nathaniel stared at the magistrate's signature. Sir Oswald stood to acquire every flooded lease. And you gave his partner authority to condemn the land, Eliza replied. He closed his eyes briefly. I will testify that I signed without examining the conflict. Your testimony may correct the public record. It does not purchase my forgiveness. I know. The answer contained no plea, which made it more difficult for Eliza to dismiss the change in him as another attempt to regain control. Nathaniel offered to ride to the county jail and demand Thomas's release, but Eliza refused to let him carry the evidence. Your title will open doors. It will not interpret what we found. Take Reverend Hale and 2 commissioners. Make Sir Oswald state in writing where Thomas is held and who has access to him. Nathaniel accepted the conditions. Before leaving, He paused beside the church door. "Eliza, Hawthorne was your only independent income. Yes, I will restore it from my unentailed property. You may compensate the trust, because your decision destroyed its asset. That is restitution, not a gift, and it gives you no claim upon my future." Nathaniel bowed his head. Understood. By late afternoon, Daniel's men had begun constructing a double timber brace from genuine oak, branded with the Ravensmere estate mark. Eliza calculated that it might survive the midnight surge if the eastern gate remained partially lowered. Their proof was strong enough to demand the commissioners suspend Verity, but only if the sealed packets reached the evening inquiry intact. Reverend Hale placed them inside an iron parish box and assigned 4 villagers to guard it. Then hoofbeats sounded in the churchyard. Sir Oswald entered with 12 constables, Lady Verity beside him, and Silas Cresswell behind her. Nathaniel and the 2 commissioners were nowhere in sight. Sir Oswald displayed a search order, authorizing him to seize all material connected to the flood investigation. "The parish box contains stolen estate property," he declared. Reverend Hale refused to surrender it without reading the order aloud. As he did, Eliza saw Verity glance toward the northern window, where smoke had begun rising beyond the trees. Bramwell timber yard was burning. Cresswell smiled faintly. One source of proof was already being destroyed, and the constables were closing around the only evidence that remained. One source of proof was already being destroyed, and the constables were closing around the only evidence that remained. Reverend Hale finished reading the search order aloud and raised his eyes to Sir Oswald.
"This authorizes the seizure of property belonging to the Ravensmere estate."
The parish register, witness statements, and sealed packets belonged to this church. They were produced from materials stolen from the Duke's waterworks, Sir Oswald replied. "Stand aside." The constables advanced, but villagers formed a silent barrier around the iron box. Eliza knew resistance would give Sir Oswald the violence he needed to portray them as a mob. "Let them take it," she said. "Every person here has witnessed its condition and contents." Verity smiled. "Witnesses loyal to the woman who ordered them to disobey lawful evacuation." Cresswell carried the box to a table and demanded the key. Reverend Hale refused. Sir Oswald ordered the lock forced. When the lid opened, the 3 sealed packets lay inside beside the parish lease register. Cresswell cut the first seal and removed the poplar shaving. This could have come from any damaged cottage. He opened the second packet and held up the Bramwell delivery tally. A common yard token with a crescent scratched into it after the flood. "Daniel found it beneath the maintenance floor," Eliza said. "In water controlled by Daniel's men," Verity replied. Cresswell opened the final packet containing the red fibers. As Reverend Hale protested, one constable knocked over an oil lamp. Flame raced across the wax thread, then caught the dry wood shaving and the edge of the parish register. Daniel smothered the fire with his coat, but the fibers curled into black ash, the tally split, and several lease pages were destroyed. The constable apologized for the accident. Sir Oswald immediately ordered the damaged objects sealed under county custody. Bramwell timber yard continued burning beyond the northern ridge, consuming the invoices and stock marks that might have authenticated them. The scheme was too complete to be improvised. Verity had waited until Eliza gathered the trail, then erased every source at once. The parliamentary commissioners arrived shortly before dusk. Nathaniel was not among them. Sir Oswald claimed he had gone to the county jail, but had failed to locate Thomas because the prisoner had been transferred for his own protection. An inquiry was convened inside the chapel, while displaced tenants listened from the nave. Verity presented the false flood report, the copied pages discovered in Thomas's satchel, and Nathaniel's signed transfer of authority. She accused Eliza of weakening the Eastern mechanism, creating a crisis she could solve publicly, and sacrificing Hawthorne Meadow so her marriage trust could demand compensation from the estate. Cresswell testified that the replacement beams had been genuine oak when he inspected them last summer. With the Bramwell yard destroyed and the sample damaged, no surviving record contradicted him. Sir Oswald then produced a petition, allegedly signed by 20 villagers, accusing Eliza of forcing them from their homes. 3 of those villagers stood in the chapel and denied signing it, but the commissioners treated the dispute as further evidence requiring investigation. Until that investigation is complete, the senior commissioner announced, Lady Verity will remain emergency superintendent. The Duchess will be confined to Blackthorn Hall and prohibited from contacting wardens, tenants, or witnesses. Verity had achieved everything she needed. Eliza would be isolated. Thomas had disappeared into county custody. Daniel could be arrested for violating his suspension, and Cresswell would control the eastern gate when the midnight surge arrived. Sir Oswald ordered Eliza to surrender the silver compass as estate evidence. She closed her fingers around it. This belongs to my private purse. It was found in the Duke's study. Because it was an anniversary gift, then its ownership may be determined later. Before the constables could take it, the chapel doors opened. Nathaniel entered with 2 county jail guards and the parliamentary clerk. His face was rigid with fury. Thomas Bell was never transferred, he said. Sir Oswald's men removed him from the jail without entering a destination in the prisoner register. Sir Oswald stood. Your Grace, this hearing concerns the Duchess. It concerns the authority I gave you. Nathaniel walked to the commissioner's table and placed his ducal seal before them. I publicly accused my wife without examining the original field records. I signed Thomas Bell's warrant after evidence had been planted in his belongings. I appointed Lady Verity, despite knowing Cresswell had entered my private study and handled my seal without permission. Verity's face lost color. Nathaniel, consider what you are saying. I have considered too late. He turned toward the tenants. The responsibility is mine. Eliza warned me before I signed. I chose political advantage, family pride, and the appearance of control over the judgment of the woman who had protected Ravensmere for 6 years. His admission did not prove Verity's conspiracy, but it destroyed the official claim that Eliza alone had caused the crisis. Nathaniel surrendered his position on the County Improvement Board, withdrew his canal petition, and pledged his unentailed London property to compensate every displaced family. The senior commissioner warned that the admission could expose him to parliamentary censure and personal liability for the failed waterworks. Then record it accurately, Nathaniel replied. He did not look toward Eliza for gratitude. He asked only that the confinement order be suspended so she could prepare the gates for the midnight surge. The commissioners allowed her to direct emergency work under observation, but they refused to remove Verity or dismiss the accusations. Nathaniel's costly truth had bought Eliza time, not vindication. Outside the chapel, darkness covered the flooded valley. The evidence from Bramwell was ruined. Thomas remained missing, and the repaired gate had less than 6 hours before the second surge. Eliza opened the compass beneath a lantern. The needle again pulled sharply east. Until that moment, she had assumed black silt had jammed the hinge, but Daniel's cleaning had removed every grain. She slipped the narrow setting pin beneath the inner plate and found a tiny magnetized iron fragment deliberately wedged beside the needle. The compass had been altered to produce a consistent 3-degree error. Eliza returned to the false report. Every eastern bearing recorded on it was also 3 degrees wrong. Cresswell had copied those readings from this exact compass after tampering with it. Yet the report was dated 3 weeks earlier, while the engraved card beneath the velvet lining confirmed the compass had been completed for Eliza's anniversary and delivered to Blackthorn Hall only 3 days ago. Cresswell could not have used it when he claimed. Verity approached before Eliza could show Nathaniel. The commissioners will resume the inquiry at 9 tomorrow morning, she said. By then, Thomas Bell will be remembered as a fugitive, and you will be remembered as the Duchess who flooded her own land for sympathy. Eliza closed the compass. Will Mr. Cresswell testify again? Of course. Good. Verity mistook the answer for resignation and walked away. Eliza turned to Reverend Hale and asked him to summon the silversmith named on the engraved card, preserve the false report under parliamentary guard, and ensure Cresswell was not told why. At the morning inquiry, she would place the compass in his hand and make him swear when, where, and how he had taken those measurements. Whatever answer he chose would expose a lie that no fire, forged signature, or magistrate's order could erase. Whatever answer Cresswell chose would expose a lie that no fire, forged signature, or magistrate's order could erase. Before Eliza could prepare the inquiry, the upstream warning bell sounded 3 times. The second surge had arrived early. Daniel's oak brace groaned as water struck the eastern gate, while laborers tightened chains beneath sheets of freezing spray. Verity attempted to dismiss them and restore Cresswell's men, but the parliamentary commissioners had witnessed enough to place emergency command temporarily in Eliza's hands. She ordered every family kept on the Millcross Ridge, stationed witnesses at both gate controls, and required each movement of a lever to be entered in Daniel's log. Nathaniel worked among the laborers without issuing a single command. When an anchor chain slipped, he helped drag it back into position, then stepped aside for Eliza to determine its angle. The surge peaked shortly after 2 in the morning. The oak brace bent but held, and the widened quarry spillway carried the excess water through the ruins of Hawthorne Meadow. No additional homes were lost. Eliza did not call the outcome a victory. The villages remained flooded, Thomas was missing, and the people responsible still possessed enough legal authority to conceal what they had done. Before dawn, Nathaniel returned to the county jail with Reverend Hale and the 2 commissioners. The gaoler admitted that Sir Oswald's constables had taken Thomas east in an unmarked carriage. A stable boy had recorded the horse numbers because one animal belonged to the magistrate's private team. The commissioners traced the team to an abandoned toll house on the Bramwell Road, where they found Thomas locked in a cellar with his wrists bound. He was frightened and bruised but alive. Rather than return him to Blackthorn Hall, Nathaniel placed him under parliamentary protection at Millcross Chapel, surrounded by Reverend Hale, Daniel, and the villagers who had witnessed the original evidence transfer. At 9 o'clock, the inquiry resumed inside the Blackthorn dining room. The anniversary flowers had wilted, but the long table remained where Nathaniel had publicly accused Eliza less than 2 days earlier. This time, tenants filled the gallery. Daniel and Thomas sat beneath parliamentary guard, and Eliza stood at the head of the table, while Verity, Cresswell, and Sir Oswald faced her. Verity attacked first. She claimed Eliza had conspired with Thomas to falsify measurements, sabotage the gate, and frighten tenants into resisting a lawful canal project. Cresswell repeated that he had inspected genuine oak beams the previous summer, and that any substitution must have occurred after Eliza assumed daily control of the waterworks. Sir Oswald presented the forged villagers' petition and argued that Nathaniel's confession proved only that a husband had been emotionally manipulated by his wife. The Duchess's entire defense, Verity concluded, depends upon burned fibers, damaged wood, and the testimony of servants whose livelihoods she controls. Eliza did not answer the insult. She began with the timeline. Daniel testified that the replacement beams arrived sealed beneath Cresswell's crescent mark and were installed before he was permitted to inspect their interior grain. Thomas testified that he saw Cresswell enter Nathaniel's study carrying a roll tied with waxed red cord. Reverend Hale described the unbroken chain by which the brake rope fibers passed from Thomas to the arms chest, then into the sealed parish box before Sir Oswald seized it. The constable who overturned the lamp admitted under questioning that Cresswell had ordered the evidence opened beside an exposed flame. Eliza then called 3 villagers whose names appeared on the petition. Each denied signing it. One was unable to write. Another had been dead for 7 months. A murmur moved through the gallery. Eliza placed the surviving lease register before the commissioners. Although several pages were burned, the undamaged index linked the purchased village debts to the Ravensmere Navigation Trust. Nathaniel authenticated his signature on the document appointing Verity, and read the emergency clause aloud. It granted her the exact authority needed to condemn flooded land, replace wardens, and approve construction contracts without a second signature. "I was warned that this power could be abused," he said. "I signed because I feared losing my parliamentary grant, more than I feared wronging my wife." Eliza did not allow his confession to become the center of the case. "The Duke's failure opened the door," she said. "It does not explain who prepared to walk through it." She turned to Sir Oswald. "Why did you guarantee the Navigation Trust's purchases?" He claimed the signature was part of a routine county arrangement. "And why were the canal stakes planted before the supposed structural failure was discovered? Preliminary surveys are common. Why did the false evacuation order send villagers directly onto land already claimed by that trust?" Sir Oswald called it coincidence. Eliza let the word hang in the room before facing Cresswell. She placed the false report under the parliamentary clerk's hand, so neither side could alter it. "You authenticated these measurements?" "I did." "When were they taken?" "On January 14th. "Where?" "At the Eastern Channel." "Which instrument did you use?" Cresswell hesitated only briefly. "The Duchess's silver survey compass." Eliza removed the compass from its velvet box. "This instrument?" "Yes." "You are certain?" Verity shifted in her chair, but Cresswell mistook the question for weakness. "I used it personally." "The Duchess stood beside me while I recorded every bearing. And the readings written here came directly from this compass?" "They did." Eliza asked the parliamentary clerk to compare the report's eastern bearings with a fresh measurement taken from the dining room's fixed north line. The silver compass showed a deviation of 3 degrees. A standard parliamentary instrument showed none. She then opened the inner plate and revealed the magnetized iron fragment lodged beside the needle. "This alteration explains the error repeated in every bearing on the false report," she said. "Mr. Cresswell could only have copied these numbers after this fragment was inserted." Cresswell recovered quickly. "The compass was already defective on January 14th. Then you maintain that you possessed this exact instrument 3 weeks ago." "I have already sworn it." Eliza lifted the engraved card from beneath the velvet lining. "This was commissioned privately as my 9th anniversary gift to Nathaniel. It did not exist when your report claims you used it." Verity stood abruptly. "A card proves nothing. It could have been replaced this morning, which is why I did not ask the commissioners to rely upon it." The dining room doors opened, and Reverend Hale entered with Mr. Josiah Alden, the silversmith whose name was engraved inside the compass case. 2 parliamentary guards carried his bound workshop ledger, delivery receipt, and the original mold used to cast the compass lid. Cresswell's confidence disappeared. Eliza placed the compass before the silversmith. "Mr. Alden, please tell this inquiry when you completed this instrument, when the magnetized fragment could have been inserted, and who signed for the box when it was delivered to Blackthorn Hall." Mr. Alden opened his ledger to a page marked with Nathaniel's initials, looked directly at Lady Verity, and began to answer. Mr. Alden opened his ledger to a page marked with Nathaniel's initials, looked directly at Lady Verity, and began to answer. "I completed this compass 4 days ago. Its casing was sealed in my workshop on Monday afternoon, and the instrument was delivered to Blackthorn Hall the following morning." He placed the signed receipt beside the false report. Lady Verity's name appeared beneath the delivery time. "Her ladyship received the box personally," he continued. "The needle was accurate when it left my hands. The iron fragment could only have been inserted after the casing was opened." Silence spread through the dining room. Cresswell's report was dated nearly 3 weeks before the compass existed. Yet every bearing reproduced the exact error created after Verity received it. Cresswell reached for the report, but a parliamentary guard stopped him. Eliza asked the clerk to compare the handwriting on the delivery receipt with Verity's signed appointment as superintendent. The formation of each letter matched. "You received the compass, gave it to Cresswell, and allowed him to alter it," Eliza said. "He used its defective readings to create a false report, then dated that report before the instrument had been made." Verity recovered enough to answer. Even if the report was inaccurate, that proves nothing about the flood. It proves why you needed me removed before the gates failed. Eliza laid out the sequence without raising her voice. Months earlier, the Ravensmere Navigation Trust had begun purchasing tenant debts through Edgar Sloane, while Sir Oswald guaranteed the transactions. Cresswell marked the future canal corridor with his crescent, and approved poplar beams stained to resemble oak, allowing the conspirators to keep the difference in price, while weakening the eastern gate. Verity then encouraged Nathaniel's belief that Eliza's family had too much influence over Ravensmere. She exploited his wounded pride and his fear of losing the parliamentary grant until he allowed her access to the map room, private study, seal, and waterworks. When the thaw arrived, Cresswell removed the locking pin, cut the brake rope, and opened Gate 4 to force the river toward the weakened channel. The false evacuation order moved tenants onto land the Navigation Trust intended to claim. Eliza's forged report provided a convenient culprit, while the public separation stripped her of authority before she could recognize the hydraulic pattern. Thomas had been framed because he witnessed Cresswell's visit. Daniel was suspended because he understood the mechanism. Bramwell Timber Yard was burned after its records became dangerous. The only portion Verity had not anticipated was Eliza sacrificing Hawthorne Meadow to save the villages, rather than protecting her independent income. Thomas confirmed that Cresswell carried the compass box out of Nathaniel's study with red cord around it. The jail guards testified that Sir Oswald's constables removed Thomas without recording a destination. Daniel identified Cresswell's crescent on the timber tally and survey stakes. 3 villagers testified that Verity's men had forced them toward the flooded eastern bank. Finally, Nathaniel authenticated the shortened black sealing wax from his cabinet and admitted that he had permitted Verity to examine his seal. He did not ask the room to excuse him. "Lady Verity manipulated my resentment," he said, "but she did not force my hand. Eliza asked me to inspect the evidence. I refused. She warned me about the authority I was transferring. I signed it. I chose ambition over judgment and pride over my wife's word. Everything that followed was made possible by that choice." The senior commissioner ordered Verity, Cresswell, and Sir Oswald detained pending trial. Verity lost control of the waterworks and all claims held through the Navigation Trust. Its purchased debts were frozen, while the tenants' leases were restored under parliamentary supervision. Cresswell faced charges for forgery, fraud, sabotage, perjury, and endangering the villages. Sir Oswald was suspended from office and charged over the forged warrants, unlawful removal of Thomas, destruction of evidence, and his concealed financial interest in the canal company. Verity faced prosecution for conspiracy, fraud, misuse of the ducal seal, and the attempted seizure of occupied land. None received punishment, merely because Nathaniel regretted trusting them. Their consequences arose from documented acts, witnesses, financial records, and the impossible compass timeline. Eliza's name was formally cleared. The commissioners struck the false report from the county record and entered her engineering account in its place. Nathaniel then stood before the same tenants who had heard him accuse her and withdrew every allegation without qualification. He acknowledged that Eliza had designed the drainage system, financed emergency repairs from her pin money, established the warning bells, trained the wardens, and saved 3 villages twice in a single night. Public harm required public repair, but Eliza did not allow praise to substitute for security. Through independent marriage trustees, Nathaniel transferred his unentailed Rosewick property to replace the income lost when Hawthorne Meadow was flooded. He funded the rebuilding of every cottage and bridge from the sale of his London house, not from tenant rents. A new river trust placed financial records beyond unilateral ducal control, restored Daniel as chief warden, granted Thomas a paid engineering apprenticeship, and appointed Eliza as contractual superintendent with authority recorded separately from her position as duchess. Nathaniel resigned from the improvement board, lost the canal grant, and accepted parliamentary censure. His estate survived, but his political ambitions did not. Eliza chose legal separation with separate maintenance while trust was rebuilt, if it ever could be. Nathaniel moved into the West Lodge and surrendered any claim to enter her rooms, direct her work, or decide when their marriage should resume. During the following 9 months, he attended every tenants' meeting without taking her chair, answered each letter she sent without demanding another, and worked under Daniel's direction on the restored Eastern Gate. He never described labor as proof that Eliza owed him forgiveness. On the first anniversary of the flood, a dinner was held in the same Blackthorn dining room where he had accused her. The rebuilt bridge could be seen through the windows, and the guests of honor were the families of Lower Harrow, Millcross, and Rosewick. Nathaniel arrived early and waited beside the empty chair at the head of the table. When Eliza entered, the musicians began the waltz that had been interrupted after 7 notes 1 year earlier. Nathaniel did not approach her. "Your place is ready," he said. "Whether mine remains beside it is yours to decide." Eliza looked at the restored silver compass lying near her plate. Its needle now pointed steadily north. "I am not returning to our old marriage," she said. Pain moved through his face, but he bowed. "I understand." She picked up the compass. "If there is to be another one, it will begin with truth, separate rooms, and no authority over my work." Nathaniel raised his eyes. "On any terms you choose." "Not any terms. Honest ones." Eliza did not replace her wedding ring, and she did not offer him the forgiveness he had once expected, simply because he was sorry. Instead, she opened the dining room doors and stepped toward the restored Eastern Gate, where the new warning bell waited to be tested. After a moment, she looked back. "You may walk with me." Nathaniel followed at her invitation, 1 pace behind, while Eliza carried the compass and chose the direction.